So we normally start the show with a misplay. Do you happen to have something from either a board game or a video game where you made a mistake?
I mean, I feel like I am I'm not a very strategic player, so I feel like everything is often a misplay pretty soon after the fact. I feel like I want to go into promotion mode because it's actually one of the things that I like about Gun It is the fun of Gun It is coming up with a plan, scrambling for a thing, and then suddenly having that moment after the time runs out where you said, oh, shoot.
I'm Hunter Pence, and you're listening to the Misplay podcast. Oh, yeah.
Hello, and welcome to the Misplay, where we
get stuck in the ice trying to find the Northwest Passage.
My name is Mark. My name is Jason, and today we are incredibly lucky to have in studio game designer Randy O'Connor. Welcome to the Misplay.
Thanks for having me.
Explain your misplay for us.
About a week ago, I was playing Expedition Northwest Passage, which is kind of this fun tile layer. You're building routes trying to find the Northwest Passage. You're in a race with other people, and it's very easy over the course of the game for the sun to travel too low on the board, and then then your ship literally gets stuck in the ice. So my competitors had made it south far enough to where they weren't trapped, and I was.
That sounds like the kind of thing that would happen to somebody in our playgroup. Everybody kind of like aggressively getting away and one person being left behind. Or if Jason had the chance to, by design, leave someone behind.
Yeah. I'm going to let you introduce yourself in a second, Randy, because you're not just a game designer. You're not just a board game designer. I know you began in 3D animation and with video games. How would you describe yourself now, though, and the different roles you take on in the industry?
I would still kind of start with I'm a game designer. A lot of my work, I say I'm doing consulting now most of the time. So I'm coming in largely actually in educational games. I do a lot of work with companies who know that games teach us stuff and want to do that, but often don't understand how, whether from a theoretical or a practical or a production standpoint. That's what I've been doing for the last number of years is, helping to teach 2-digit addition or subtraction or teach entrepreneurial education or programming education. And it's really cool. And my latest thing is actually in dementia care. And how can you use interactive scenarios to teach people?
I'll actually add that the last time that I saw you, Randy, I was taking a course with you at Victory Point Cafe where you were talking about game pieces.
Yeah, I spent a couple years actually teaching at the college level experimental game design and video game production. And I had a couple lectures there that were a ton of fun, just introducing people to what game design is. So I was working with Victory Point to bring a couple of those just to anyone who wanted to pay $10.
You've successfully launched a couple of games on Kickstarter. I actually have two in front of you that are your games, Roll-in-One and Gun It. Gun It was your most recent one.
Gun It and Roll-in-One are projects that I kind of had in my head just to get away from the screen. When you're working in video games, you just spend all your time sitting in front of a computer. And about 12, 13 years ago, I kind of had this moment where I was like, I need to stop staring at a screen so much. And that was when I started to explore board games.
I don't know how formally we've told this story, Mark. It's come up a couple of different times throughout the first two seasons. The first thing Mark and I ever did as the Misplay was we went to Games of Berkeley and we went to GobCon. Is that?
Yes, GobCon.
And at the time, what I had been pitching to Mark was a golf game. I said, we're going to build a golf game. I have this idea. I want to go back to my childhood. It is about finding golf balls in the woods. And that's the game I want. I'm like, nobody makes a golf game. And Mark's like, nobody plays a golf game. And lo and behold, the very first thing we ever do is the Misplay. And I never said it to you at the time because I didn't want to take away. I didn't want it to be about me. We sat down at the table. First person I meet is Randy. And on the table, he has a golf game. And I was just blown away. I was like, I don't know if this is serendipitous. I don't know if this is a bad omen, but I loved that moment.
It was like you found your golf ball, because when I walked up, Jason was already like sitting, beaming at the impending conversation of, oh, you're wrong, people do play golf games.
I gave him the biggest grin, and I didn't say anything to him at the time. I just gave him the huge grin when he sat down at the table.
Well, I'm sorry to tell you, it has not been a, commercially massive success. So I might say a lot of those people are kind of right. Sorry to let you know. I think golf is actually there are a lot of these games. A lot of people have had the idea of how can I unpack golf. It feels very translatable, right? I just need to get this thing over there using a golf club. But yes, I was warned before I started kickstarting it and before I started preparing the Kickstarter that sports board games are not generally a commercial success.
Luckily, we've moved away from that. We are not building a sports board game. We are building a animal voting.
Animal voting is good.
Animal voting is straight on, right? We've moved away from that, and we are working on a different game. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, but specifically today, we're going to talk about playtesting. And that's the primary reason for our conversation today. But before we get to that, today's episode is sponsored by Board Game Casual. Board Game Casual is a YouTube channel welcoming people into the board game hobby with video reviews, recommendations, unboxings, tips for accessorizing on a budget, and more. I've really enjoyed their design diary series, and I'm going to be a little selfish and throw an idea out there. I would love to see something about creating a map, a little world, maybe for animal voters to move around, maybe with different habitats. How do I make a cool little map board for some future playtests I have coming up? I need some ideas. If you need ideas, give Board Game Casual a view at Board Game Casual on YouTube at Board Game Casual channel. You know what it's time for, Mark?
A game?
Yeah.
Quickfire?
Quick Fire Challenge!
Our bumpers still need work.
Yeah, we're working on our bumpers. Quick Fire is a short, gamified exercise to kind of keep our minds thinking about game design. Our Quickfire Challenge today is a random word game. We're going to pull up a random word from the dictionary and create a game mechanic from it and give a short description. So loading is the word. So we're going to create a game mechanic around the word loading. It is a good one because there's multiple routes you can go with this.
I mean, I was just thinking I just went to a forklift. As soon as I got away from a loading bar appearing, I mean, I could also imagine some sort of, there is a game where you could have your computer is loading, you need something, you need it to do something, and it's just hanging, right? It's on that 14% done. And then you need it to get somewhere, but you also know it's been on the fritz. So how often or when do you hit the hold down the power and reset and try again?
I'm stuck. I'm stuck on the loading, right? I'm thinking about the dots that go around. Mm-hmm. So I would create, a circular game component with dots that go around, and you have to start an action that is going to happen in the future. So you put it on one of the dots, and then you do things within the game to move it. And so eventually when you get it all the way around, it does the big thing that it's supposed to happen.
Kind of like a cooler version of I Wish I Was Over There.
Yes.
I went to a cartoony extreme powerlifting thing where you're loading weights trying to load to failure or load to not failure. Uh-huh. Everyone has their piece. You're physically loading the other components onto a bar, hoping to not reach failure, but still have the highest weight of your competitors.
Quick Fire Challenge.
Pew, pew, pew. Not sure that either of our ideas from Quickfire are going to make it to the playtest floor for us, Jason. Maybe Randy's. Randy sounded pretty cool. Where are we?
Playtesting is how we met Randy. Mark and I both played Roll-in-One and Gun It more than a year ago now in Berkeley. And I think we would both classify ourselves still as newbies or novices in a lot of different lenses as board game designers, especially as playtesters. So it's a little scary, Randy, for us to be moving towards a place where we're going to be running live playtests. We're looking at our first live playtest possibly being in May at KublaCon in Burlingame. Let us tell you kind of where we are right now with our game. So as we're talking today about playtesting, you have a sense of where we're at and what's happening in our game.
We've been living in a very exploratory place as mandated by our project manager recently, beginning of the month.
Mark is pointing at me.
In January, we started our commitment to this single idea of what we've been calling Animal Kingdom on the show. And that came with an original idea of you have a pool of voters of animal characters cards that you'll be playing hard and soft stances for that had different ways of pulling animals towards you. Kind of our next iterative leap of that was moving to a way to try to expedite and create a little bit more interactivity. And so we had a version where everybody made their decision about what their action was going to be at the same time. And then we had a resolution, a turn order for the order in which stances resolved. Then we kind of hit some, like a bump in the road or a pause. And Jason was like, we need to explore more. He said, if anybody wants to, go ahead and make a completely parallel version. Jason was the only one who did it. Mm-hmm. But it came to this neat map version while Peter was working on a separate parallel version. And so the map version was like a centerpiece for habitats for players to move to, and then that's where they were recruiting their animals from. Then we played the parallel version that Peter was making that was centered around this concept of rallies and debates where players were preparing for these kind of communal events. And then we had a little detour with Mike C., friend of the show, to pitch a Tableau builder version of the game. And now we've kind of moved towards, and what we're preparing for is a playtest of a combined version of the map version with the rally.
All of our playtests right now have been we're using playingcards.io, and we've been testing remotely with everybody, but we're getting to a point where, we're going to want to have physical copies in front of us to be able to show other people. And so when we reached out to you to talk about playtesting, you broke it down into 3 components. Can you explain them?
Everything can be looked at through different lenses. The key one for me that I think is in any game design is this idea of what I call the turn. It is, you have to start responding to the thing in front of you versus an idea. So you kind of have this moment, you have this idea of voting, right? But eventually you're going to have a game and not the idea. And you kind of have to choose when it is one or the other. Early on, I think the key point for me that is difficult to respond to in a game is, when do I start looking at the thing in front of me instead of I'm trying to make voting?
And I will say, since hearing that previously when you kind of outlined the turn for me, I've been saying that like I invented the thing. Like I was just like, oh yeah, we're not at the turn yet, guys. We'll get there. And we were playtesting Mike C's game Plunder. And I'm like, yeah, you're not quite at the turn yet. You'll get there. You can see the turn. It's up there, right? But you're just not. I really like the language of the turn. And we can say we're not there yet. We still have this idea. We can see it now, right? As we build with Rally and map version.
I really like the way you define the turn. A lot of what you put in the show doc for us speaks to like the teacher side of me, because it's very based in what we can physically observe in the game that we're playing. And I think that's a switch that we're working collaboratively with the team. We need to continue to develop the way we talk about games and the way that we see it, because I think there is a split sometimes between conceptual framework and the product in front of us. So I also really appreciate the turn as this kind of grounding concept that's definable in these observable terms.
The thing that makes a game so difficult is you're not technically trying to solve a known thing, right? You don't come in with this is the task. Your goal is I'm trying to make something to play, and I'm trying to make it so we can play it well, and that, whatever that means. And so there's this like weird thing where you have an idea and you're like, okay, it's going to feel like this. And eventually you run out of time, you get bored, or, any number of things, or you actually feel the moment, like, oh, I feel a moment in here. And now you need to respond to that rather than I had the idea.
I can say that in our current versions of the game and all of our playtests that we've had so far, every version has been radically different. If we're talking about, if we're trying to quantify it and put it in numbers, the last version from the previous version, maybe we carried over 10% of it. I feel like, I don't know if you can quantify the turn, but I feel like we got to be carrying over like 75 to 90% of it to, round that turn.
40%.
Okay.
I think if you get to 40%, I think one of the things that I'm always seeking for is the moment. The moment in a game is often where you kind of capture the decision that's interesting, that maybe outside of it and the context of it is interesting. With Roll-in-One, my golf game, I was not trying to build all of golf. It really was, can I make the different, the 6 different polyhedral dice, right, a D4 through a D20, feel like golf clubs? So to me, the moment was literally selecting your club. And that was it, right? I only needed that moment. And then I said, now let's have some fun, like designing the course. Let's make this modular. Let's think about what's actually on the clubs. But there was, at the start, kind of when I had the turn was pretty early, probably about 30% of the way through the process, because I didn't mind throwing anything out. But I'd say in terms of game design, there was 30 to 40% of the game there when I started to respond to the game.
Let's stay there. How would you decide when that game is ready for what you'd call public playtesting, where you're going to put it out in front of other people?
Pretty darn early. I wouldn't be afraid to put most anything in front of anyone. And you just kind of prepare people for kind of the different like stages. Like a game is not a game without players. So you want to figure out how quickly can I get a game loop in front of people. The term game loop is, the idea of the thing you do over and over again. In basketball, like there's sub loops, right? Dribbling, you get possession of the ball, you can dribble and move, and then you stop dribbling and you are now there and you either pass it. You want a loop that you can kind of respond to, but as soon as you can respond to like a series of actions, yeah, I'd be getting in front of people and then just see what happens. I mean, my games are awful at the start, right? Like almost every game, I would say 80% of the time you put your first idea and you're like, oh, that did nothing that I expected it to.
I know this might be jumping ahead just a little bit, but since you brought it up, when you have a playtest, when you've set up a playtest and you run into one of those game crashing kinds of issues early in your playtest, what's your solution for that? Are you just done for the day? Do you have to go back to the drawing board, or is there something to be gleaned from some other solution to get around whatever the crash was?
I like having a stopping point that I'm pushing forward. Like I try to get to a certain threshold, right? Like, can we get through the loop? Like maybe, this moment isn't good, but like, can we at least play through this like 2 or 3 like times? Can we do the core action like a handful of times? Because there might be another moment in there that you start to see. There was a moment in that people responded to. I have one of my friends, he will change things up 4 times in the middle of a playtest. Like if something isn't going exactly right, or if he just has an idea, he's an improviser and he's very happy to just, all right, let's try this. All right, let's try this. I am way too lazy and slow-minded to do that.
The turn was the first element. The second was how do you behave and what do you do during a playtest? And Mark has we have the Mark Katz 7 steps for playtesting. Mark has also put together some norms for the team. He's shaking his head over there, but Mark has really tried to define the process. And Mark, these are your playtest norms, right?
Yes. Ours. They're the norms that we nominally agreed on as a team.
The Mark Katz playtest terms.
Sure.
When Randy's teaching a class in the future, he's going to be, I want to tell you about the Mark Katz playtest norms. We're the ones doing the playtest right now. And so we have our norms for our team. But then in the future, we're going to be running the playtest. We're not going to be playing the game. So there's a little bit of separation there.
So for our internal norms then, what we've been trying is to play through the game as written by the current version. We want to center our comments on specific playtest objectives. We ask our whoever was leading that version, we ask them to outline what specifically do they want feedback on. Mm-hmm. And then we have a way to ask clarifying questions about rules. we're asking clarifying questions about the rules in order to progress the playtest forward. I'm on Team Randy of we should be trying to aim towards completion of the game. Rulings that come from the current playtest will remain consistent during a playtest. So if we have one of those crashes, whatever we decide on is the way that we're going to play for the rest of it. And then we also ask everyone to take notes on other things that come up because we don't want to silence other valuable feedback. But in the short time that we have for playtesting, we want it centered on our playtest objectives, and other feedback can be recorded for discussion later. What do you think? What are things that we haven't thought of or need to add, or you would recommend adding?
No, I think all that makes a lot of sense. I think, the big moment that I think a lot about is trying to find the space for you to be as silent as possible. And this is maybe more from a video game standpoint, but I do think it's relevant in board games as well, is that, what happens when you're not there, right? That's really what you're trying to seek, is like, what is the thing that happens when that person pulls out the game when you're not there? What is happening? And there's kind of like broadly, like a couple different frameworks of games. There's puzzles and procedural games. There's a lot of other ways you could break it down, right? But there are games where once you finish it once, it is done, right? If you play the Unlock series or Exit or any of these things where it's like, okay, we've done it, right? And now we are done. And then there's procedural things where it's like, we do it. Oh, let's like change the thing a little bit, or we've gotten another feature. That's like, you can do it over and over again, basketball. And in any of them, you kind of want to see what evolves. So I think what you have makes a lot of sense. I'm going to like pause to talk about, I worked on a game, Scapegoat 2. It's a puzzle platformer by Ian Stalker. He was an incredible playtester. He would put his puzzle game in front of someone and watch until it was painful. He was so good at this because he was kind of like, I want that moment of discovery, right? It might be 8 minutes from now. I will give someone 5 minutes of not knowing what to do before I will even think about like saying something. Because I want to just see what happens. Here, I have a video game. What happens? Do you work through it? Do you get like fed up? Do you kind of like, there's a whole interesting space that is happening when they start to respond to the thing and not to you.
So we have to differentiate though, right? Because we have only done the internal playtesting, and we are still talking through our ideas and highlighting things that we want it to be, but it's not quite yet, or something that's not working. We haven't yet put it in front of somebody for the first time who isn't a part of the creation process.
I actually, on some level, I like these norms to translate to the live playtesting, but I think we would add some additional features and steps for the team members that are observing a live playtest that doesn't involve the design team.
Let us hypothetically jump in time for this next question. We're sitting down in Burlingame. We're at KublaCon. We're at the Protospiel. We have a little table. We've got our Misplay banner. I've got the Misplay coasters on the table. And we put a little sign up that says, hey, come try our game. And a couple people sit down. What do I do?
What would you do if you were teaching me right now?
Right. I would start with thanking them for sitting down. Right.
Yeah.
I appreciate you. We're the Misplay, and this is our game. And I'm going to give you the 10-minute. In my mind, it's always not more than 10 minutes trying to explain rules to somebody who's sitting down to play your game. And then I would have them play the game.
Yeah.
Have I got it?
You've got it. Like the great thing with like a board game is you can just put anything on the table and ask someone to respond, and you can say, here's a bunch of pieces. Here's what they do. Let's try it. If you want to test just that like core concept, you could just say, let's test 3 rounds. If alternately you want to play a full game, the nice thing, so there's a local group called the Golden Gate Game Makers that kind of runs playtests all around the Bay Area, and they've made a huge effort to consolidate and like say, hey, are you in the Bay and you want to play test your game? Here's all the events we know about. They run kind of the KublaCon Protospiel, and they will welcome you to a table. They will welcome anyone. Does your kid have an idea for a game? Like, come to KublaCon. Do you have an idea? We have people who have like 3-hour games. That's a little harder to get people into, but at a weekend, like a full board gaming convention, you should be able to find someone who's willing to sit down to basically any type of game. I think From a very practical standpoint, the one thing I would say you really want is a sheet of paper that you can give to that player. Here's some basics of what you're interacting with.
I'm really glad that you mentioned the Golden Gate Game Makers, because I'm in the group, I'm on the meetup, I'm in the Discord, but I haven't been active. And I really think, Mark, that is kind of our next step, is we're going to their playtests. We're not talking about the Misplay. We're not talking about Animal Kingdom. We're going to their playtests, sitting down and being somebody who's playtesting someone else's games, like we did with Randy in Berkeley. We need to do more of that, I think, for sure. And that'll help shape what we know we want to see when we're leading the table.
It's like systems research.
Is it?
Yeah, you have to observe and engage in the practices that you want to codify, so that you can describe them and define them so that they're in terms that other people can use.
How frequently are you going to events through Golden Gate Game Makers?
I try to go to one of them every month or so. Conveniently enough, there is one in Berkeley that happens twice a month. There's also one in San Francisco that's not too hard for me to get to that I like to go. I try to go to one board game play test a month, even if I'm not bringing my own game.
That's my new goal, Mark. I'm writing it down. That's my goal. Where's the San Francisco one?
Dog Patch.
Is there like first Wednesday? Is it?
Last Thursday.
Last Thursday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we also welcome people who are not designers. That is generally a designer heavy evening. A lot of the people there, that's a designer heavy evening. Victory Point Cafe in downtown Berkeley is really good for players, like a mix of players and designers. There's a place down in San Jose called the Guild House. There's like 18 events, I think, each month that they have listed. So, and they've done a good job to try to have none of them on the same day.
So I'll move us into your third point, and that is, how do you respond to feedback? You've put the game in front of people. Mm-hmm. They've played it, whether it's 3 rounds or it's a whole game. They're giving you feedback. How do you respond to that? How do you take that? What did you want to share there?
I want to hear everything. I love it when people just immediately start saying things, but it's often useful to ask them to both give you something positive and give you something critical. 2 ways that you could say it is a thing you liked and a thing you think could be improved. Another way, someone else in the scene, Glenn Cotter, another local game designer, he says, what is a thing that you would get rid of? And what is something that you wouldn't want to see go away?
Hippo cards. I don't want to see hippo cards go away, Mark.
Hippo cards are an area that need improvement.
If you don't want to see something go away, you can set that line,
I've set that line.
Yeah.
We have hippo cards in Animal Kingdom where, hippos are aggressive and they are the opposition in politics in our game. So hippo oppo, where you play them on an opponent and, sabotage what they're doing. We have to make them function better. The concept is great.
I think, the idea of opposition, if that's, is that one of the core features of your game?
It is the core feature of hippo cards.
I think you could probably simplify and say, is opposition one of the key ideas? Most board games to me, I am maybe very simple minded in some ways, but I really like just having one thing, and you're is opposition, one of the 1 to 2 features that you want?
Yeah. How do you filter through the feedback that you're getting to determine what's useful versus kind of what is someone's personal preference?
Anything you hear once is preference. As soon as you hear it again, you got to start paying attention.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, I think I don't think there's a whole lot more to it than that. You want to write everything down, right? And you will hear ideas, and the reality is most of them you're going to hear again and again and again. And you can kind of respond to that and say, okay, it doesn't mean it's a bad idea or a good idea. Sometimes you'll hear something and then it's, oh, I have overemphasized this feature, or maybe I've underemphasized another feature, which is why they're now glomming onto something. People are very bad at specific feedback. If you've played it far more than other people, the first time someone plays it, don't listen to their numbers, right? Oh, I think this should be power this versus that. that they're not very good at that, but a playtester is really good at like giving you a vibe. You know, I liked this moment. I didn't like this moment. And that's what you need to respond to. Like, you're the one who sees all the systems and interactions. So why did they get stuck there?
Let me give a little bit of context for something in playtesting that we've been working on and has been a feature that we added to the game. We added this credibility metric to the most recent versions that we've tried different iterations of and think it's going to stick. Maybe not.
Influence. We've changed the name.
It's changed.
It's influence.
So it's influence now, but we've gone through different versions of it where it has been essentially like a currency. We've done a metric where you are spending it to protect your voters. So it's gone through these different iterations. What would you be looking for in feedback? I know we're only working with our internal team right now, but when you have kind of this competing set of iterations, what are you looking for in terms of feedback or in terms of the way people are responding to playtesting that would guide you towards which version is the one you'd want to select?
Well, I think that's where I would have my own goals, where I would put down, you know, like there's a reason I kind of glommed onto the hippo cards that, you know, you use the term opposition. That should be a thing that you're like writing down. You're like, opposition is a feature that matters to me. You know, like, what are the other features inside of this, right? Influence and credibility are two incredibly different terms in my mind. So like, you know, letting them shift, it sounds like you haven't made the turn yet. And that's fine, right? And so you could say, oh, credibility is actually the term I really like, or influence is the term I really like. Influence and opposition. You know, as we talked about earlier, games don't matter. So it is up to you to decide which of those moments matter. You know, another thing that I was thinking about, right, is, are you trying to make something commercial? Are you trying to make something educational? Like, how important is it to you that it feel like American elections? Is that actually a thing? Or are you kind of like, ooh, like, I don't want to get into this. I'm willing to just let it be a fun game versus, no, I do want to capture like some of the tension and discomfort. It's okay to put one of those words down and say, like, is it fitting that word?
So we can say we've had that conversation, right? And we were cringing even as you were talking about it. We don't want it to mirror current politics, right? We want to take some of the elements. One of the things that we've said in our conversation, we never want to put something in the game where somebody goes, oh, is this because of what that person did? Is that tied to, we are trying to keep it fun and stay away from anything that is topical.
So what about elections do you like? So if I asked you right here, influence versus credibility, why did you make the switch to influence? And do you like that switch?
I like the switch a lot. Mark has the good answer.
I still like credibility as the term, but the way that we were playing credibility, it felt like money. Because to me, when I hear credibility, I'm like, credibility is something that you develop, you build and retain. Money is something that you spend.
And he wasn't spending it in our playtest. He was just building it.
Yeah, you lose all of it, right? I feel like credibility is hard. Like, you gain it over time and you lose it very quickly.
But not like money, right?
Right. It becomes that. It might become slower, right, to gain the second time. You know, you have some sort of, and like when you talked about credibility, some of these things, one of the nice features of a board game, right, is how much is this in someone's head, right? Are any of these features like deciding what is quantified in like tokens and currency and trackers versus no, in fact, like credibility is the unspoken, you know, feature, whereas influence feels like a thing that I would expect to be like as a currency.
In my head, credibility is the thing that you're building with the voters, with the animals. Influence is what you're doing with it, right? How you're using that. So I have that credibility. How am I now using it?
So you do like influence?
I'm team credibility for the vocabulary.
I didn't see.
Designing credibility is not necessarily the reason why we're here. We've given an example from Animal Kingdom. Give us an example from your experience of using feedback to make kind of one of these large scale changes, because credibility was not originally in Animal Kingdom. And it's something that has come in later in the process as a response to other problems or challenges that we were trying to solve for.
I am very slow to change my games. I will play test something like 3 times before I potentially make a change. One of the things that I'm currently working on, I have a new game, which is actually my first game, called Scoundrels. Like changing the values of some of the cards in there has shifted. I'm really bad at self-promotion. I should probably be talking about Gun It. So one of the biggest things, Gun It, you're in a car in the middle of a car chase. It's like an action game. You know, you're like driving down the highway. There was a map. I kind of got rid of it really quickly because it didn't make sense for the context of what you're trying to do. And I did get feedback throughout the process where people are like, I'd love a map. I'd love a map. I'd love a map. People haven't mentioned a map in the last year. When I show people, no one is asking me for a map. Maybe I just got through, you know, maybe it's unspoken, but, you know, that was like they were seeing a different game than I was seeing. But you're going to hear that sort of thing. And then you have to decide at any time, like, are they right? Are they wrong? There are things, or are they seeing a different game than I'm seeing? And with Scoundrels, the new game, I have made some adjustments pretty seriously towards what players have suggested, because there's a bunch of card play in the game. It didn't work the first time a decade ago, so why don't I listen to some people this time? And it's been really fun. But yeah, you're kind of always saying, like, my favorite thing about game design is that I get a billion ideas and many of them are not mine, right? Like, my job as a game designer is to curate the feedback I'm hearing into systems.
I love that quote. I get a billion ideas and a lot of them are not mine.
I want to go back because you said you play something 3 times minimum before you're willing to make a change, or before you're considering making a change. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, something like that.
So when you're talking about the difference between pre-turn design and development and post-turn design and development, is there a change? What kind of changes to your playtest process happen post-turn? Are there changes in frequency? Are there changes in the type of feedback you're looking for? What changes?
Yeah, I think the real thing you're trying to find is just all the details, the 80 additional cards that you need to make, right? It's like I think I'm more willing to scrap things. Does this turn, right? Like, does this turn work, right? Like, does that thing, you're just trying to make the content. You're trying to, like, you need another animal, right? You need 3 more animals. I think I'm much more willing to, like, let an idea go if it's not supporting that.
But that is a good rule that we've got to get to, where we can play something multiple times. I think we're still really in that idea phase where we're just throwing things out that it's okay to do it. And we don't want to mix those up. I think it's okay we're doing that right now, but pretty soon I do think we need to implement that.
Mm-hmm. What do you have a, like, metric by which you're going to consider the turn, like, happened, right? Like in video game production, I just run out of time, right? Like, oh, we have to ship this in like 5 months. Do you know what you're going to do or how you're going to, like, know you're there?
Well, we can use time as kind of that metric, right? We've stated that we want to go to KublaCon and play test it. And I think at KublaCon, I think we can almost do anything that we're doing and it's going to be okay. Put anything in front of somebody and just see what happens. Is it 40%? That was the number that you gave me earlier.
Yeah.
Longer term, we were looking at Gen Con. So we applied and were accepted into the first exposure playtest hall.
Awesome.
So that is also a target we're shooting for. So I hate to say that time dictates it a little bit, but time does dictate it a little bit. I think we are trying to get to a point right now where we feel the game is where the players are making interesting choices, right? Where you feel like your decisions are interesting and there's some strategy to it. Mm-hmm. And initially there wasn't any strategy. We called it a counting game. It was like, I'll take the swimming animals because there's 6 of them. Why would I take the climbing animals? There's only 2 of them. Getting to a point where we feel like our strategy is interesting is driving it right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, it's more, I would love to be at a point in the game. I think for Kubla Khan, I would look at, can we play through a version of the game, whatever the version is, without major crashes that require designer intervention? Because if we want a real sense of what a playtester is going through when they play the game, we can't have designer intervention in that way.
Do you feel like you're not there yet?
Not quite.
Map version technically like finished, but the things that were happening weren't really things we wanted to have happen. It was just like, we did it because like we put cards in the game just to demonstrate that these cards could potentially work, but the content on the cards wasn't what we wanted the players to experience.
I think map version is close, and I'll be curious to see how the hybrid map rally with the seasonal calendar goes, because that could be, for me, that could meet the criteria for this is in a state where it's okay to bring in set in front of playtesters. And it wouldn't necessarily matter to me if hippo cards don't do what we want them to yet, or event cards or wild cards or whatever aren't having the impact on the game that we want, because I think that's a later part of the process. But being able to say, here are these things, it plays through, you can hand the one pager to our playtesters and get out of the way and get a real observation of a playtest. I think map version is close. For Gen Con, I would love to see, like, here are all the features that we want in the game, be able to change features, but not necessarily be abandoning or bringing in new things at that point, given the timelines that we've kind of established for ourselves.
What is your favorite part of the game right now? What's your favorite like moment?
I have trouble differentiating as the designer and as the player answering that. As a designer right now, trying to figure out the way that we can have public stances function. So these are things that you're saying as a character. You're saying that I would be a really good candidate for the animals that are stealthy, right? I'm a little sneaky myself. So I'm taking a stance and I'm saying stealthy. Well, there's a public aspect to this game right now that we're trying to work in, where even though it's not Mark's turn, it's my turn, I'm saying stealthy. He has an opportunity to say, oh, yeah, me too. I do that too, guys. I'm stealthy too. If he does that on my turn, then I get some sort of credibility or influence bonus to offset that. So he gets the play on my turn, but I get a bonus for the future in some way. So as a designer, that is the piece that has been really interesting for me to try to navigate.
So I feel like that even connects a little bit to opposition, right? Like you could see how opposition is kind of like a different thing to that, right? It's like, I feel like there's a game right in there, right? It's like coming out for something, and are people agreeing with you or like opposing you?
The design piece that stuck the most out to me when we tried the map version for the first time was the sense of, I've built my credibility as it was in that game, where if I have credibility for all of the traits on an animal, I immediately get that animal. So it's the aspect of, in its infancy, building your platform as the character you're playing. I build my platform, and then as I build my platform, I'm able to grab more voters. That's the piece that stands out the most to me, is one, what I want for the game, and two, what I found most satisfying.
I know, Randy, you have said you're not good at promoting yourself. Your company is Randy O Games, and you can visit Randy's website at randyo.net. You can follow Randy O'Connor on Instagram at Randy O Games. You can find Gunit. We can find it locally. How would somebody order Gunit if they wanted it and they lived somewhere else?
You can order it in the US, but it is at randyo.net/gunit.html.
There are many things that I appreciate about you, Randy, from the first time that we sat down and we talked about games in Berkeley, to coming to one of your classes, to having you drive over here and talk to us. I really appreciate that. Developing these relationships in San Francisco, in the Bay Area, are really important for us. So we really appreciate that. You mentioned a project you were working on, Scoundrels. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're currently working on?
So Scoundrels was my first idea. I'm coming back to it because I know there is a game there. It is an aggressive, fun take that game, which is intended to make you feel like a pirate. It was inspired by another game that had a cloth map that was a pirate game, but it was just dice rolling. And I said, there's more to being a pirate and, getting treasure. it ends up using a hand of swords, sails, and cannons and allows you to sail around. And it's just very absurd, very asymmetric. I'm coming back to it after, I don't know, 8 years away from it.
Scoundrel sounds very hippo heavy in terms of beating up your opponents. I'm sure Jason and I would love to play the 2-player version of it together. Thank you again so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
The Misplay podcast is brought to you by Mike C., Missy, JP Savard, Parney, Kyle Flowers, Adjos, Brian, Binns, and Peter. Consider donating at patreon.com/themisplay. If you'd like to become a featured sponsor of the show, find our FAQ in Discord.
Or when do you hit the hold down the power and reset to try it again?
Say and try it again, just because the notebook hit.
Sure.
We'll cut it.
Say and try it again.
Oh, no, just you say and try again.